Hey folks, you're listening to Wine with Dave. Actually, you're not listening. You are actually watching and listening. And this is my new show. I'm so excited. Episode 11, 1-1. Ours go to 11. Who said that? What rock documentarian had that line? Ours go to 11. Just put it in the comments if you know. Who's on tonight? I got you trained, Chris. Rentham, Massachusetts. That's cool. Anne-Marie Lambert. Hi, Anne-Marie. Great seeing you tonight. Tonight's going to be a really cool night. Chris Maynard, great music. Yeah, you like that? Do you like the groovy little intro stuff, or do you like the little 10-second clip of when I first come on? That would be really interesting to know because I need feedback. So someone's mic is on. Can you just lower that? Okay. I'm talking to you. Joe knows who I am. Joe is in the green room waiting right now. His mic is being picked up. So guys, I am excited. This is episode 11 and learning a lot of stuff. I'm going to get right into it because I've got a really cool guest. His name is Joe Cetrone, and he's a paranormal researcher, heavy metal drummer, author. Could you get so wide? I don't know. That's crazy, but that's just the kind of guy he is. Pretty creative guy. But let me get into the national days. I was getting a little bored with talking about, the national days and National Popcorn Day and all that stuff. But thanks, Chris. Yeah, groovy music. But, I should still do it. I might just hang on a couple more days of these national days. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But tonight, the national day, you ready for this? It's actually really strange. There's some strange ones. But I'm only going to focus on one. Let's see. Today is view today's national list. And I just get this from the National Day calendar. It's National Glazed Spiral Ham Day. Yeah, I'm just not going to touch that. National Rubber Eraser Day. Boring. National Take a Wild Guess Day. I mean, they're just running out of ideas. National Tax Day. That's kind of cool. National Banana Day. I could talk about that, but I'm going to talk about this one. Kind of close to my heart. It's kind of fascinating. National Titanic Remembrance Day. That's right. The Titanic sank today. Lost a couple thousand people, right? We're losing that in America probably by the day now, I think. I don't even know the numbers. I'm just not watching the news lately because it's all bad, It's all bad. But let me tell you about the Titanic, okay? Let's see. Let me show you this. I thought this was really, really cool. Where are we? Where is this overlay? Titanic. Check this out, all right? Check these guys out. Now, these are the musicians on the Titanic, okay? There were 8 musicians in all, and I know everyone is you're doing the whole, add them all up. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I believe the band leader is not there. Joe, can you turn your mic down? You're coming through. 8. There's 8 musicians. The band leader's not mentioned, but those guys are, and they're 21 to 33 years old. They're pretty young. I guess when I saw the movie Titanic and saw documentaries, I just always pictured 50, 60-year-old guys playing classical instruments dying, but they're kids. They were kids. So that's that. That's really interesting. So the musicians had to know 352 songs. Can you imagine? Because the first class guests, right, they would all throw out hey, do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? And they were handed the list. If you went on first class, one of the things you got was a list of all the songs that the band knew. 352. That is crazy. Feedback you don't want to know. Feedback you don't want to know. Rick says, Midnight on the Sea, and the band played Fare Thee Well. That's right. We're going back a few years. But this is the band right here. Look how Look how young they are. Look at the second row. Second row, right over there? All the way to the left. That guy looks like a comic. He's the violinist. He's 21 years old. You could look it up. And then the guy below him is another violinist. He was like 22, something like that. But crazy, right? They had to know 352 songs. But all those guys, only 3 musicians' bodies were recovered. That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy. They just couldn't find the rest, couldn't find the rest of the bodies. I don't know. Shocks, whatever got them, 5 were not found. But one thing I want to bring up that's really interesting, the London Symphony Orchestra, and I didn't know this till today, they were going to go on the Titanic, the LSO, the entire LSO. I don't know how many members. The London Symphony Orchestra was going to be on the Titanic April 15th, right? But they didn't. They were going on a tour to Canada and US, and they were able to go a week early. So they're like, well, guys, let's go now. Let's just start our tour a week early. So they went last week. They did not go this week, and they would have died. Interesting story that would have been, huh? London Symphony Orchestra goes down with the ship. Would have lost a whole lot more than 8 musicians. But they were grateful that they went on tour early. Of course, that must have freaked them out. Now they're on tour, all excited. All these Irish and English musicians, well, mostly English, and they're on tour, and they're like, oh, biggest disaster ever. And we could have been on that ship. The stories they must have been telling. Interesting. But listen, there was a survivor. What is going on? Why is that going on? That's interesting. There was a survivor. That was not Survivor, the band, by the way. That was just there was a survivor. His name was Lawrence Beasley, Titanic survivor. Listen to this. He said, many brave things were done that night, but none were more brave than those done by men playing minute after minute as the ship settled quietly lower and lower into the sea. They were like the brave men, the brave musicians going down. So anyway, that's it. Today's the National Day of remembering the Titanic. So, did anybody like that? Anybody like the story? Anybody have any interesting stories, interesting facts about the Titanic? And if you're just tuning in, this is Wine with Dave. We've got a bunch of listeners on here. This is a good wine. Who do we have? Chris says, today is a good warm-up to the show. What do we got? Hi, Dave. So glad to be there. Patricia Raskin. Cool. Kim already had what 10 songs? No, we didn't play that one. We didn't play that gig. Anyway, I'm excited about the guest that's coming on in a few minutes. Had a rough day, real busy at work. My gosh, I'm working from home. I'm in this new little layer over here, and which I think is better, a little better lighting, right? A little better lighting. Things are shining and shiny bright. Got my mood lighting behind me. But it's crazy, just lots of work, one after another, Zoom calls, between Zoom calls and phone calls and emails and design work and logo revisions and web, and oh my gosh, it was crazy. I literally just started working on the show about 5:30, 6 o'clock, right after supper. So I have to put this together. It takes about an hour and a half to put this whole thing together. Wine with Dave is not easy. So, hey, tell me where you're from. Where are you guys from? Chris Maynard says 3 dogs were saved on the Titanic. Is that true? 3 dogs were saved on the Titanic. Wow. They must have just been, the wealthy people had the dogs and they just brought little Mitzi. Corinne Bergeron, hello. Heavy metal, ? Yeah, tonight's a heavy metal night. Hang in there. My guest, heavy metal drummer, Joe Cetrone. He's coming on in a minute. Just hang on there. It's heavy. It's dark. He's going to talk about some dark demonic forces and angelic forces and a whole bunch of other things, which is interesting because Joe has this quote where he talks about the ocean. I'm not going to steal the thunder from you, Joe, but where he says something about spirituality is like the ocean, and the deeper you go, and here we are talking about the Titanic. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That just happened that way. Bree Hawkwater's coming from the Bucket. Does anyone know where the Bucket is in Rhode Island? It is Pawtucket. Pawtucket. All right, I'm going to bring them on right now. Are you guys ready? But first, before I bring them on, I'm doing this new segment where, kind of like the night show host, the late show host, they all do the same thing. They'll show you a clip of a movie, and then boom, and then there's the actor comes out. So I'm kind of doing the same thing. But man, technology is scary. It might not work. But if it does, I'm going to be one happy boy. So Shift Command 6. Joe Cetrone, paranormal researcher, heavy metal drummer, and author. Check this guy out.
I was definitely privileged to be part of the paranormal community and networking with some of the bigger veterans in the business. Traveling around the world to various locations only opened the door to more questions than answers. Being on television shows such as Haunted Case Files and Paranormal Survivor definitely allowed me the platform to give an opinion. I compare the spirit realm to a large ocean. The deeper you dive, the more you see what you never knew existed. My son was attacked by a spirit during the time our team took on some dark cases. I feel it was a warning that I entered uncharted territories. Fame's deception leads you to believe ghost hunting is a fun hobby for enthusiasts, but conveniently leave out who the real hunters are.
Yeah, come on. How you doing, Joe?
Good. How are you? It's good to be here.
Yeah, that was a good, clean switch. I like that. That doesn't happen often on the show.
The transition was very nice.
Thank you. I appreciate the transition coming from a drummer. Heavy metal drummer, paranormal researcher, and author. Holy crap, that's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. It's great to be here, especially during this time. To speak to somebody else outside of my house right now is really good. So, I mean, no offense against my wife. She's been great for putting up with me. But to speak to somebody outside of that realm right now is really good to be here. So once again, thank you for what you're doing. And I think you got a good future endeavor with your radio show.
I can be somebody. That's awesome. I have a dream. Hey, listen, speaking of dreams, when did you first discover drums? Were you like a typical 5-year-old pots and pans kind of kid, or what?
So that's a great question. Pots and pans, kind of, sort of. It was weird. Back in the day when everybody was like big into Kiss and all those bands that were coming in, you know, everybody wanted to be Gene Simmons. They wanted to be Paul Stanley. Nobody wanted to be Peter Criss. So they were putting on a concert drummer. So I says, well, I guess I'll do Peter Criss. I ended up getting a garbage can, flipping it over, getting 2 pencils for drumsticks, and I was playing to the beat. I think it was Love Gun. I want to say it was Love Gun. So I'm playing Love Gun, and all of a sudden I start to unlock something, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I can actually keep a rhythm. So my father happened to walk in, and who was a musician also, walked in and says, hey, you know what? You can hold a beat. So they had just hired a jazz drummer to join their band who was an 18-year-old drummer. He was kind of like a prodigy. He says, hey, Joe, you know what? I'll teach a kid and give him lessons and see what happens. And that just kind of took off, and I went with it and never stopped.
That's cool. Did you ever try any other instruments, or was it just like, I'm in drums and this is it?
Well, having ADHD, especially bad as a kid, I can tell you that playing drums was probably the best release that I had. I attempted to do guitar, didn't inspire me. I tried keyboards, did that a little bit okay, but just always went back to drums. Drums is just my passion. I love the rhythms of it, the feel that it gave me, and the power that it had. You can be a guy that sits in the back of a whole band, but be the loudest person.
Yeah, that was always the problem. But that's good. That's good for a guitar player. It's like turn down, but actually, you know, we turned up. Guitar players turned up. That's great. What was your first kit? Do you remember it? Was it a little buckets?
First kit, it was a mahogany 5-piece black Tama drum set that I got at Al Trombetti Music in Warwick.
Yes, I went there, lived there practically.
Yep, that was my first one. Graduated from that and went to Ludwig, and then Ludwig, I found my sweet spot, which was Sonar. But I started off with Tama at Al Trombetti. He was the one that sold me my first kit.
Where did you take lessons? Did you take lessons after that guy at Trombetti too, or no? You just always had the same drum?
No, what ended up happening is that guy, Brian, ended up becoming a close friend of mine and kind of like an older brother figure. So every Tuesday for like 9 months, he'd come over, you know, drill me with the music books on stick control and just trying to understand. And he wouldn't let me get a drum set until I finished the whole book and was able to play rudiments on a little Remo drum pad. Once I graduated for that, then he said I can get a set. He gave me lessons from there, and then I kind of just went on my own. But I probably was with him for a couple of years.
So you were telling me earlier off camera that Sonar is like really, really good for heavy metal drummers. I mean, it can take a beating. Is it the shells? Is it the hardware? What makes a good heavy metal drum set? I've always wanted to know.
So Sonar, especially when you start getting into the Signature series, they're really heavy. They're heavy drums. I mean, back in the day, some of those drums were like 50 pounds, like the bass drums, all really solid, made in Germany. The first guy that kind of blew me away was at the Living Room, the original Living Room in Providence off of Promenade Street. I went and seen a King Diamond concert, and Mickey D was playing the drums, and he had a double bass, 3 toms, Sonar drum set. It was black, and once the show started, throughout the remaining set, it was like cannons going through you. I mean, people were coming up to me and saying, wow, they sound like cannons just thumping through your chest. I says, well, that's the drum set I want to have, and that's the kind of style that I want to play. I want to play double bass, so when I go up there, I just blast everybody with pure power. I made that my goal to get onto the Living Room stage. Joined an original project in 1990, I believe it was.
Oh, what was the name? I might have heard of them.
The name of the band was No Clue. They were original band.
No, I don't have a clue on that.
It was a progressive band that sounded a lot like Queensryche. We ended up having a show on Soundcheck on 94 HJY, and also Dr. Metal played one of our tracks on the Metal Zone. And my goal was to get up on the Living Room stage and play on the same stage that Mickey D played, because he was a big influence to mine. And then after that, Nico McBrain for Iron Maiden, he had a Sonar, so it was inevitable that I had to get a Sonar too. And I never looked back. I mean, it's what makes a Sonar. It's just so powerful when it's mic'd up and it's tuned up right.
Yep.
It's got such a cannon machine gun sound that you just can't help but feel it. You're mesmerized by just the way that the drums pierce right through you. So, and that was it. That's how I did it.
You guys have any questions? Just leave comments. They'll come right up on the screen. You know, Joe's open to doing that. What's your favorite music genre these days? What are you listening to?
All right. So I do obviously I love metal, but I listen to jazz, fusion jazz. I like funk. I like mainstream alternative music. You know, as a big fan of like Disturbed, Alice in Chains, Motley Crue. I mean, bands like that. Passion has always been metal, probably because I can just get a lot of the energy out. But progressive rock, Rush, Yes, Dream Theater, bands like that have always been my big influence.
So every drummer will remember, well, every American will remember the day of 9/11 where you were, but every drummer will remember the day that Neil Peart died. Where were you and what were you thinking?
Wow. So crazy as it sounds, Neil Peart was a big influence growing up, especially in the MTV days when you would turn it on and like Subdivisions would be on there or Tom Sawyer. I think Neil Peart was the first progressive player that I seen outside of hard metal, where I looked at the stuff that he was doing behind the kit, the fills, the accents, the snare drum work, and he did it so fluently. At that point, I dedicated my life. I said, you know what? If I can get through playing the whole Signals album by Rush, if I can at least do that in my lifetime, I'll be happy, because that's how much of an influence that he had over me. But when he died, what I was doing, I was on my way with my wife. We were going grocery shopping. I'm at a red light, and a friend of mine who I hadn't talked to probably in about 4 or 5 months texts me out of nowhere. He says, "Did you hear the news about Neil Peart?" I says, "No, why? What's up?" And he said, at that point, I was totally oblivious. He says he died. And I just sat there and I was like, wow, because I thought he was going to live forever. He was just one of those guys that even though he got out of Rush, I figured that he'd eventually do something or put out like some sort of DVD. But, that's how you think of your people that was so highly influenced by that, like they're going to live forever, like actors. I still expect, Jamie Lee Curtis to look like Jamie Lee Curtis that she did back in Halloween, and it doesn't happen that way.
That's odd you said her. Did you hear the news today about her?
No.
She's still alive, dude.
That's it.
Jamie Lee Curtis is alive. Oh, let me interject really quick. Last night, someone texted me, a friend of mine, and he said something about Bernie, wife, died, COVID-19. I'm like, what, Bernie Sanders' wife? So I asked people to can you guys look that up? Did Bernie Sanders' wife just die of COVID-19? It wasn't. But what was true is Bernie and Phil's, the furniture store, Bernie died. Who's Phyllis's husband. Phyllis's whatever. But yeah, Bernie and Phil's, famous Rhode Island, New England furniture brand. He died of COVID-19. So that was last night. So I get the good thing with my show is I get these immediate feeds of news and death and, breaking news stuff. So I get to share it because this is a live show. It's taped before a live audience. Problem is I get the news wrong. I screw it up. I thought it was Bernie Sanders' wife. Anyway, yeah, that was, that's crazy, huh? Neil dies. It's too young, 67. I mean, he retired, but he had years. He had years to go.
And what they did that kind of blew me away was, and a lot of people, is they never released anything that he was even sick. So they kept everything silent. Yeah. So he'd already died. I think it was, what did he die on Tuesday?
Yeah, it was 3 days.
Friday.
Is that crazy? Yeah,
so
I mean, I hand it to Brian May and Roger Taylor, the guys in Queen, who it had to have been 6 months or so or a year. They knew all along, and reporters asked them, what's up with Freddie Mercury? And they're like, right, he's fine. He's just, he had a fever or something. I don't know. And they just hid it because they were his friend, But Getty and Alex just said, no, he's our friend, and we're not going to say anything. They knew all along.
I know, and that's loyal friends to do that. And Incidentally, Rush was supposed to have, I don't think it was Rush, but they were supposed to do a tribute to Neil Peart, and they were going to have all the proceeds that were going to go to the research for cancer. And I think it was May 16th that they were going to have it, but they had to postpone that now, obviously, to probably September because of the virus. And what blows me away is I think we were supposed to do a show on May 16th because it was Ronnie James Dio's 10th year that he's been passed for 10 years. So it was
it seems like it's much longer than that. It feels like Ronnie James Dio died 15 years ago. No? 10 years.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So Jamie,
what was it 2009, 2010?
I don't even know. Jamie Dorsey, who's my cousin, saw Rush 4 times. How many times did you see Rush?
I seen Rush 9 times.
Whoa. That's a lot.
9 times, and 3 was off the same tour, which was Snakes and Arrows.
Wow. So if you're tuning in now, you're watching Wine with Dave, and this is Joe Cetrone. He's a drummer with Holy Diver. Tell me about them. You're playing Dio stuff. That's crazy. Any Rainbow or just straight Dio?
So I was in a band with 2 of the members. We were doing a cover band called Deviate, just doing kind of like top 40 stuff, a little of everything.
Yep.
You know, some hard stuff, some dance stuff. We had to replace our singer, and we replaced him with a guy by the name of John Mullini, and he ended up looking like Ronnie James Dio. And then when I started talking to him, I realized that he even talked like Ronnie James Dio, and he had said that he was part of a Ronnie James Dio tribute band called Holy Diver, which I believe came out originally in like 1999, 2000.
Yep.
And he's like, I'm thinking about putting Holy Diver back together again. What do you guys want to do? So there was a Metallica tribute band that was playing at JR's Fastlane, which was Mardi Gras, but JR's Bourbon Street Rock House was in Mardi Gras in Cranston Complex.
Yep.
He says there's a Metallica tribute band that's going to be playing. I think it was Battery. They need an opening band. He says, listen, guys, how about we do 10 songs of Dio, and we'll open up for those guys. We learned the songs. We played the 10 songs. We drew like 250 people there by 9 o'clock. And the owner loved it. He says, you guys should do this more often. So he put together Holy Diver again. And then we started playing from that point on.
Wow.
We did Dio stuff, Sabbath, stuff with Sabbath, like, Children of the Sea, things like that. And then we did some Rainbow as well, Man on the Silver Mountain. So
the older stuff. That's cool.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
Nice. You love it, huh? You've been at it for like, what, 23 years? No, 13 years.
Yeah, 13 years. The band was together, though, for about 22, 23 years now. I joined them in 2007. So I've been with them for 13 years, and we got a bunch of gigs canceled because of this virus as well. So that didn't help.
Wow.
Either. The virus, it was... we had that memorial show that was supposed to be in Providence on May 16th. I'm pretty sure that's canceled at this point. But I'm going to do it until I can't do it no more. It's hard to let go of that 80s, that 80s mind frame as a musician, when you're playing out in the 80s, late 80s, 90s into the 2000s, and just to let go of it right now, it's like, I'm not ready to retire yet.
Yeah, that's some cool stuff. I was into punk and new wave and underground stuff and post-punk. But in the back of my mind, I would hear Ronnie James Dio's voice on the radio, and I'm like, who the heck is that? Like, his voice was like a razor blade. It cut right. Like I was just saying earlier, no matter how aggressive the music was, his voice was right on top of it, and his voice was like a guitar. It just cut right through, and his melodies and his phrasing. And at the time, I thought he's just kind of overacting. He's like this overactor, theatrical. But looking back, like, oh my gosh, his voice is amazing. He's one of the best heavy metal vocalists around. He really is.
Absolutely. And if you talk to like some of the bigger musicians out there too, like in that are playing, they'll attribute a lot to Ronnie. His voice was powerful. You knew that voice. And the other thing I loved about Ronnie is, even though it sounded that he was singing about negative stuff, he always sang about positive things and real things, and used a lot of metaphors and allegory in his music. But he was always about the little person overcoming the big one, always overcoming your Goliath in your life. And if the people took time to listen to what he writes about, it wasn't just about devils and demons and wizards. It was always a message behind what he did. He just used that platform to sell a product.
Right, that's cool. So let me switch to something similar. So with the band, you're in quarantine. Are you guys practicing? What's going on? You practicing with scarves on the mouth or what?
So since the quarantine, we have not practiced. We were scheduled to practice the day after they started doing this quarantine thing, and then obviously that kind of all went crazy. Matter of fact, our bass player was on a cruise ship doing multiple shows with the band that he was there. They had to cut that early, send him home, and so what we do now is we do a lot of our homework here at home. I've got an electric drums that are set up in the other room. Put my headphones on, play some music, do Dio stuff, and rehearse. You know, we've come to a point now in our lives that if we just do our homework and show up at the show and we don't get to rehearse, everything is still going to be fine, because as long as we know our parts individually, we know that we're going to at least sound tight enough to play a show.
Right. Jamie Dorsey says Ronnie was 5 feet tall. He was a short guy, huh?
He was a small guy with, I used to call him the screaming midget, and that's not
elf.
To be offensive to anything.
Yeah, it's like a screaming elf.
He was like an elf.
He was
that elf, and he was powerful. And he was even his first band, I believe, before. I think it was Elf. I think he was in a band called Elf.
Yep, that sounds familiar. That's probably why you get that word elf. Okay. What led you to Paranormal Activity? Jamie, listen to this. Listen to this guy. Oh, wrong way. Everything's mirrored here. Listen to this guy. Paranormal Activity. What's got you started on that?
Okay. So, honestly, I mean, obviously we all have experiences. Well, some of us have experiences that we could talk about as kids, but it's the things that when you get older and what sticks with you that's more prominent. It really started with my father back in 2005, where I really went kind of like deep into it. Yep. I had a conversation with my dad. We were sitting on the porch, and he, out of nowhere, randomly, started talking about heaven and hell and where he thought we went when we died. Mm-hmm. So I gave him my opinion. You know, I'd like to believe that there's a place called heaven and a place where we can go to and all those things. And he was like, you know something, you know, and it seemed like he got a lot out of that conversation. And he said to me, he goes, you know, I've lived a good life, and when God is ready to take me, he will. And that was the last conversation I had with him. 48 hours later, he had died tragically of a heart attack. And I remember the day of his funeral, when we came back to the house, he had a clock, this wind-up clock that was sitting on the mantle, and it was his favorite clock. And the door to the mantle, the door to the clock actually opened up and shut by itself. Now, one of the people that were there that noticed it immediately started crying, because she believed that it was a sign from my father to say, hey, listen, I'm okay. I ended up contacting Keith Johnson. At that point, he was just transitioning out of the Ghost Hunters, out of TAPS, and going on to his own thing. He came to the house. You know, they did an investigation. They ended up pulling an EVP of a voice, you know, an electronic voice of something that was there. And
what's an EVP?
So an EVP is electronic voice phenomenon. It said that we vibrate at certain frequencies in the way we speak, as far as the hertz that we do. And these voices will sometimes play on a recorder. You don't hear it in real time, but when you play back the tape, you can hear a voice that just kind of comes through. It could be a little two-word syllable like "get out" or "who are you?" And there was a voice that came over that was nobody in the room at the time. So of course, I had to know more about it. I started getting on the fast track of understanding paranormal, joining up with teams, learning the scientific approach. You know, Ghost Hunters was big at that point. You know, I had talked to Grant Wilson, Jason, because they were from Warwick. And I kind of just branched off on my own, put together a team and says, you know what? I want to go out there and prove to myself, and if I can come up with any evidence to show that there's life after death, or at least of another dimension, I'll be happy. And that's what I did. I ended up getting some photographs of of spirits and voices that are unknown voices that weren't from any of the people that were at the investigations. At that point, it went to radio show interviews, from radio show to television, and that's it. Just I went on a fast track really quick to only find proof of what I've always believed existed.
Wow. Okay, you got to tell me like the freakiest thing that happened to you. Were you ever scared, like beyond scared? And by the way, Rick Greenwood says, "Ooh, this is freaky."
So Rick, so this is the freak. One of the freakiest things. We went and did a case in Kansas, Atchison, Kansas. It was called the Sally House. You can definitely go on the internet and look on the Sally House.
How do you SALLY?
SALLIE house.
Okay, look it up, Jamie. Look it up, Sally House.
Yep. There was a family that lived there in the 90s. They were called the Pickmans, Deborah and Tony Pickman. They lived there for X amount of time. They experienced a lot of paranormal activity. So here they are. 2008 comes. I'm like, okay, you know what? I want to go to this Sally House. So we met with Deborah and Tony Pickman, who actually, they weren't living there anymore, but we got access to the house, had them give us a tour around the home. And this is how it all started. He wasn't even in there for more than maybe 10, 15 minutes that he said, "Hey, I feel something on my back. Something's not right." He lifted up his shirt, and there was 3 scratch marks that were down his back, and they were fresh blood.
No.
And he ended up getting attacked on his forehead and on his forearm. So for me, what was scary is watching this person all of a sudden bleed in front of you, and nobody's around there to touch him or do anything to him. And obviously he's not doing it to himself.
Yeah, because it's on his back. So Jamie Dorsey's...
And on his arm and on his forehead.
Man, Jamie was... he actually works for a company that goes in and services homes with pests and mice and rats and all that stuff. But he said he's been in the Conjuring house many times. What is that in Westerly, or I don't know where that's from?
Harrisville, I believe it's Harrisville, Rhode Island.
Harrisville, yeah. Wow, man, scratch marks on his back. There's no way he could have scratched that.
Yeah, no, and I brought a police officer there and a paramedic to check it out to make sure he wasn't pulling any fasties or inflicting the wounds on himself, and he wasn't.
Oh, so you were like, it's not that you were skeptical, you just wanted to make sure that this really was happening.
Yeah, I was in there. We did a 72-hour investigation. I brought a film crew in there. I brought a paramedic and a police officer, and we walked around the house, and we got pictures of like spirit orbs with faces in them. And then, of course, that's when that happened to Tony Pickman, where he got scratched on 3 occasions. So that was pretty freaky.
So you talked about, and I mentioned it earlier, about the ocean. What's that quote you said? The spirituality or the spirit world is like an ocean?
Yeah, I compare it to a large ocean, and the deeper you go, you find things, and you think that you've like nailed it down, and then you go deeper and you say, wow, I didn't know that existed. So a lot of the things that you think you might have a grip on in life, when the deeper you go into that abyss of whatever the unknown is, you find things you never thought that were there. And I don't think you'll ever resolve it. It's something that is probably not for us. Maybe in the next life to come, or when we transition out of this world, we'll find more answers. But I can say one thing about investigating. The more you search, the more you think you come up with answers, you end up leaving with more questions.
So how do you feel about people who are like kind of negative on this and they're just very base? Like, yeah, that doesn't exist. Because I consider myself a spiritual person. I'm at this point in my life, I am wide open to whatever happens is a possibility that it could be something that I need to look into. But there are people that don't want to look into that stuff.
So here is the this is what I have to say on that. I respect everybody's opinion, and I realize that fear A lot of times fear will push somebody away from believing in something that they can't see. A lot of people will say, I don't believe in spirits, but yet they believe in God. And I'd always say, well, if you don't believe in spirits and you believe in God, how do you believe in God when God is a spirit? So, there are those skeptics that are out there. But a lot of times I always say this, it's probably not meant for you to know now. And maybe one day in your life, you might have something happen or hear something. And if that's the case, that might not happen either. But one day you will realize that when you depart from this world, I can assure you, I don't know what it looks like or what it is or who's on the other side, but I can tell you there are energies, live energies with intelligence that reside in a dimension that we can't see. And that I know from 100% I can say. So, it's tough. It's you got to find a balance.
I completely agree with you. I am really fascinated with NDE, near-death experience. I've read a couple books on it. It fascinates me. No matter what religion you're part of, there's been atheists who've died and had near-death experiences and come back. They all see the light. They all see this river. It's kind of like they're standing in a river of humanity that's just like flushing through them. And they come back and they're changed. They're like, oh my gosh, I want that. That feeling was the most beautiful feeling I've ever had. I want to go back to that. And
absolutely. I work with a doctor, and he'd be a great interview too for you. But anyway, I have a doctor friend who experienced a lot of those near-death experiences almost on a daily basis. He works with hospice patients, and he's been in the room many times where just before they transition, they'll see a loved one that is standing there, or they'll sit right up and say, my mother's here. There she is. Do you see her? And he'll be like, I don't see her, but I'm sure, he's very, compassionate. But he says a lot of people who transition in their last minutes of life will always say that a loved one appears to them, or they see a light and they just kind of go peacefully. So there's got to be definitely something to it.
It's like a welcoming committee on the other side, like right. It's going to be okay, but man, I've got stories right now that I'd love to share, but I'm interviewing you, not me. So, really interesting stuff. I really appreciate meeting you, and we got to get together and grab a coffee sometime. When this quarantine is over, man, we're going long on this one.
I'm ready. Absolutely, that would be great. And
we should, yeah. Do you find a connection between music and the spirit world?
So I do believe there's a connection between the music and the spirit world, because I think that music is an expression. It's an accent of emotion. It's something that you feel. And I could always, tell everybody, do a self-test. Listen to a song on the radio, and chances are that particular song might have a memory that takes you back to a certain time in your life. And sometimes you need to go to that song when you want to relive that memory.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
Take that one step. Think about that. Now, we all know about that, especially as musicians being conductors, but it happens to everybody.
Yep.
So now take it one step further. Imagine thinking about somebody. Like for me, I would think about my dad when he had passed. And it seems like every time I thought about him, if I was on driving in the car and I put the radio on, a Barry Manilow song would come on. And I started realizing that there's a connection that maybe the spirit world knows how to manipulate through audio and through using some of the electromagnetic frequencies that we use to kind of get messages to us. And I think they join a flow of emotion to speak to us. And of course, music is like that universal ingredient. And I think it's through prayer. It's through times where you get those chills when you hear a song. It can affect your emotions to make you happy, sad, angry. I mean, I think music as a whole has a deep connection with the spirit world, because I think they both vibrate at the same frequency.
You are a very spiritual drummer. So whatever they say about drummers, I'm done with that thought. drummers are stupid. They just want the girls, you know. But like, no, you're a brilliant guy. It's great to have you on, man. I got so many questions. I don't even know where to start. Although I have started. You're working on a novel. Tell me about that.
So the novel we're working on is called Shades of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it chronicles the life of a guy named Soul, because soul pretty well stands for the essence of all who we are as people.
S-O-L-U-L. S-O-U-L.
S-O-U-L. And basically I took the allegorical, metaphoric approach, speaking some of my experience from other people that I've come in contact through my life, and taking, experiences, whether they're, traumatic events or losing loved ones. And I put it together in a story that I think is going to be a little freaky, a little scary at times, but it's also it's a book of redemption. Mm-hmm. And my wife has been working on that with me, because it's kind of like we're taking both of our emotions as parents, as people who's had bad experiences and lost loved ones, fuse that all together, and let's put it into a book from darkness into light. But let's put a little flavor to it. Let's add some allegory. Let's get a little music. Let's get a little horror. Let's get a little Stephen King vibe going on.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, let's put a message in there. So we've been on it for about 1.5 years.
Nice. You got to let me know when that comes out. I will absolutely promote that.
Absolutely. And what I will tell everybody out there too is definitely go onto my website and go onto that YouTube channel and just subscribe, and you can watch that video of Shades of Darkness as well.
Yeah, so go to Joe Cetrone. Joe S. See, I'm really good with news. I just get it wrong. JoeCetrone.net. JoeCetrone.net, and you'll see that video. That's a great video, by the way. I mean, you had some really good videographers working on that. I must say. Joe, man, we got to connect after the corona. This is weird that I'm even saying this, that I have to say, hey, let's connect after this dilemma we're going through. But you grew up on Sandy Lane in Warwick, and I never met you in all these years. Is that crazy or what?
Yeah. So I was born in Providence, and I lived there till I was about 8 years old. Moved to Warwick, basically spent most of my life, teens, and into my early 20s, living in Warwick. Once I got into music, 18, 19, started playing out in bands, I kind of disappeared a little bit. So I stayed under the radar for a while. That's probably why I just kind of existed. But Warwick will always have a place in my heart. Growing up going from the city to the suburbs was huge for me. And I still love Warwick. I still like going down there, going through Oakland Beach and, the old Rocky Point. I remember I think my first job was at Rocky Point.
Was it really?
I was a ride operator for, what it was, the Music Express.
No way. My favorite ride ever.
It was the Music Express.
I mean, I loved the haunted house, but it was tacky. We used to jump out of the car and open the doors ourselves and run down the track and to the next set of doors and hide behind it, because we felt like it wasn't scary enough. So the next car behind us would, boom, the doors would open, but there'd be a human being there, ah! It was funny. But the Music Express, I loved that. There would be, and you know what? When I think of the Music Express, I think of Dreamweaver. You know that song?
Oh yeah, and because they would play Dreamweaver, they would play Aerosmith.
Yeah,
get Back in the Saddle. They do a lot of the rock songs when you're going through.
Oh, they do Dream On. They would do Back in the Saddle, and then all of a sudden it would go backwards. That was the highlight of my life. Going to the Music Express, going backwards, listening to. More Than a Feeling by Boston, or, oh my gosh. That brings back...
A lot of memories to accent those emotions.
You bring back memories with a capital M. Listen, it's been great hanging with you, and I got to have you back again. Not talking about so much drums and music, but really getting into, the book and the novel and all that. I will have you back, okay?
Awesome.
I will have you back.
I do appreciate it.
Very good. Jamie Dorsey, he left this message: the smartest drummer I ever met. Guys, if you have any questions, throw them out there because we're going to go to my next segment pretty soon. Jamie said met. He spelled it wrong. The smartest drummer I ever meet. He said the smartest drummer I ever meet. Jamie, what school you not go to? But he meant met. Anyway, what do we got? So, if you're a good person in life, you go to a good place after, I believe. Yeah, I'll tell you, it was a great interview, man. Thanks so much, Joe, for coming on, and I appreciate everything that you're doing.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate you for doing what you're doing, and I hope we definitely can do this again. And at any time when this virus is done and we can go live normal lives out there in society, let's definitely get together for some coffee.
Come on, brother. Starbucks.
Let's do it.
A grande. We'll do a grande together.
You got it.
Is it grande or is it grand? I don't know what it is. Pilgrim.
Grande.
Jamie Dorsey says good. Pilgrim. All right. Take care, buddy. We'll talk soon.
All right. Take care. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Man, was that a good interview or what? That was awesome. Man, I am loving this show. I think I found a second calling. I'm a marketer, graphic designer, social media kind of guy, but man, at night, I put the Batman cape on and I love interviewing people. You know what it is? I love people. I seriously, honestly love people. Jamie Dorsey says, thanks, Joe. Hey, Joe, where you going with that gun in your hand? We got to connect with Joe. Jamie, you and I got to connect with Joe. If you're just tuning in, you missed a great interview. But you know what? In Facebook world, they save the videos. You can always go back and listen to the end. And I'm probably thinking of putting this on YouTube. But right now, we are going to slip into another segment, and we only have like 8 minutes. We don't have a lot of time, folks. We do not have a lot of time. This segment is called